Dad perfect events. I was driving past Kyle's house when I decided to drop by and check on some paperwork. But when I saw my wife's silver Honda parked right there in his driveway, the same car that should have been at her book club meeting, my stomach dropped like a stone. Something was definitely wrong here. I parked down the street and quietly walked up to the side window, trying not to make any noise. What I heard through that half-open window destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. My name's Theodore Anderson, but everyone calls me Ted. I'm 57 years old, and I've spent the last 30 years building Anderson Construction from a single pickup truck into an $8 million operation here in Iowa. I'm also a veteran, did 2 tours in the Army before I came home, and started swinging hammers for a living. When the old fool finally signs those papers, we'll have everything we've been planning for. Patricia's voice drifted through that window like poison. I stood there frozen, keys still in my hand, trying to process what I was hearing. 5 minutes earlier, I'd called my wife to say I was stopping by Kyle's place to grab some bid documents. She'd told me she was at her monthly book club meeting and wouldn't be home until 9. Yet, here was her Honda sitting in Kyle Henderson's driveway like she owned the place. Kyle Henderson, my business partner for 8 years, my friend for 15 years, the guy I'd served with in Afghanistan, the guy I trusted with my company's finances and my family's future. I crept closer to the window and peered through the gap in the curtains. There they were, clear as day. My wife of 25 years lounging on Kyle's leather couch like she belonged there. And Kyle leaning against his bookshelf with that cocky grin I'd seen him use on opposing attorneys. The timeline's perfect, Kyle was saying, his voice sharp with satisfaction. File in July, claim irreconcilable differences. With Iowa's no-fault divorce laws, Patricia's entitled to half of everything acquired during marriage, plus spousal support for life. Patricia laughed, that same tinkling sound I'd fallen for back in 1999. The construction business alone is worth $8 million now. Add the rental properties, the vacation cabin, all those investment accounts. We're looking at nearly $12 million total. My hands started shaking as I fumbled for my phone, hitting record just as Kyle continued his legal briefing. The beautiful part is Ted's trusting nature, Kyle said, gesturing toward a manila folder on the coffee table. The man has no idea we've been documenting his assets for over a year. Bank statements, property deeds, business valuations, everything's already copied and filed away. A year. They'd been planning this for over a year. 25 years of playing the devoted wife, Patricia said, examining her fingernails like she was discussing the weather, pretending to care about his boring construction stories, nodding sympathetically when he worried about payroll. God, the man actually believes I love him. That hit me like a punch to the gut. 25 years of marriage reduced to a performance. Every anniversary dinner, every vacation, every time she'd said I love you, all of it fake. A stick cracked under my foot. Both of them froze mid-conversation, heads snapping toward the window like startled deer. I pressed myself against the brick wall, heart hammering against my ribs, sweat beading despite the cool evening air. Did you hear something? Patricia's voice carried a note of panic. Probably just a cat, Kyle replied after a moment. You're being paranoid. Can you blame me? If Ted found out about this before we're ready? He won't, Kyle cut her off. The man couldn't spot a conspiracy if it came with flashing lights. By October, you'll be divorced, wealthy, and free to do whatever you want. I forced myself to stay hidden until their conversation resumed, my phone capturing every poisonous word. When I finally crept back to my truck 20 minutes later, my entire world had shifted. 25 years of marriage reduced to a legal strategy session between my wife and my business partner. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring at my hands. The same hands that had built Anderson Construction from nothing, that had provided every comfort Patricia enjoyed, that had shaken Kyle's hand when we became partners. Now I knew what they really thought of me. The old fool who actually believed his wife loved him. The worst part, until 30 minutes ago, I absolutely did believe it. I drove home in a daze, muscle memory guiding my truck through familiar streets while my mind raced through 25 years of memories, looking for signs I'd missed. When had Patricia's gratitude for our comfortable life turned into entitlement? When had Kyle's friendship become opportunism? The house felt different when I walked in. Not like home anymore, but like a stage set for Patricia's performance. Every family photo on the mantle suddenly looked fake. Our wedding picture from 1999. Patricia beautiful in her white dress, Me, awkward in a rented tux, both of us supposedly glowing with love. Had she been calculating even then? I went to my home office and closed the door. Time to think like the soldier I used to be. This wasn't just about hurt feelings. This was tactical warfare, and I'd been ambushed by people I trusted. But the enemy had made a crucial mistake. They'd underestimated their target. Kyle thought he was dealing with a trusting fool who'd built a successful business through dumb luck. He had no idea that the man who'd survived 2 combat tours and built Anderson Construction from scratch might have a few strategic skills of his own. I spent the next hour listening to the recording over and over, taking notes. Their timeline, their tactics, their assumptions about my capabilities. All of it went into a notebook that would become my battle plan. 3 days later, Patricia was sitting across from me at breakfast, buttering her toast and asking about my day like the loving wife she'd been pretending to be for nearly 3 decades. I watched her performance with new eyes, noting the practiced expressions of interest when I mentioned work challenges, the calculated affection in her voice. "How's Kyle doing?" she asked casually. "You've seemed stressed about the Henderson project lately." The Henderson project, a $2 million municipal contract that Kyle had been handling the financing for. I'd been worried about some irregularities in the payments, but now I wondered if those weren't accidents at all. "He's fine," I said, watching her face. "We're meeting this afternoon to go over some numbers." Patricia's smile flickered for just a moment. "Oh? Anything serious?" "Just routine financial review," I lied. What I was actually planning was a much deeper dive into our company's books, with the help of Anthony Parker, my original accountant who Kyle had gradually pushed aside over the past 2 years. That afternoon, Tony and I spread out. 5 years' worth of financial records in my office conference room. What we found made my blood run cold. "Ted," Tony said quietly, pointing to a series of transactions. $37,000 transferred to an account I don't recognize, all signed off by Kyle. I leaned over the documents. The account holder name made my jaw clench. Patricia Anderson. They'd been siphoning money from my own company to fund their conspiracy. "There's more," Tony continued, pulling out another folder. "Kyle's been moving funds around for months. Nothing obviously illegal, but definitely suspicious. And look at this. He's been copying all our financial documents to an external drive. The scope of their operation was staggering. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to build our business, Kyle had been systematically documenting and stealing from it. Patricia had been playing the supportive wife while secretly preparing to destroy me financially. But they'd made one critical error in their planning. They'd assumed I was the same trusting guy they'd been manipulating for years. They didn't know I'd been gathering intelligence on them for 72 hours, building a counter-strategy that would make their conspiracy look like amateur hour. My phone rang. Patricia's name on the caller ID. "Hey, honey," she said sweetly. "I'm running late from book club. Don't wait up for me." Book club at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. I checked the tracker I'd quietly installed on her phone 2 days earlier. She was at Kyle's house again. "No problem," I said. "Take your time." After I hung up, I called George Walsh, president of First National and my friend for 20 years. "George, I need to discuss account security," I said. "I have reason to believe there may be unauthorized access to some of our business and personal accounts." "How serious are we talking, Ted?" "Serious enough that I need all joint access frozen pending a full audit." George had handled divorces for other business owners. He understood immediately. "I'll have everything. Locked down within the hour. All account holders will need to appear in person with photo ID to access anything." The security holds went into effect at 4:17 p.m. Patricia's book club meeting ended abruptly at 4:45 when her credit card was declined at Starbucks. My phone started buzzing with her panicked calls by 5 p.m. "Ted, something's wrong with our accounts," she said, her voice tight with controlled fear. "My card was declined, and when I called the bank, they said there's some kind of security hold. Do you know anything about this?" Perfect innocence in her voice. No mention of the joint account with Kyle's name on it. No admission that she'd been moving money without my knowledge. "Security hold," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern. "That sounds serious. What kind of security issue?" "They said something about verifying identity and account access." "It's embarrassing, Ted. I couldn't even pay for coffee with Linda and Susan." The distress in her voice was genuine, but not because she cared about me, because her operation was suddenly threatened. "I'll call George first thing tomorrow," I assured her. "We'll get this sorted out." But I didn't call George. Instead, I spent the evening reviewing the evidence I'd gathered and planning my next move. The beauty of military training is that it teaches you patience. You don't react emotionally to enemy action. You gather intelligence, assess the situation, and strike when the moment is right. I'd learned that lesson the hard way in Afghanistan, where hasty decisions got people killed. Over the next week, I watched Patricia's desperation grow. She'd gone from having unlimited access to our joint accounts to carrying whatever cash was in her purse. Kyle wasn't doing much better. His law practice had been living off the regular infusions of cash he'd been siphoning from Anderson Construction. I hired a private investigator, Mike Rodriguez, a former military police officer who specialized in corporate fraud. Within 48 hours, he'd documented Patricia and Kyle's movements, their secret meetings, and Kyle's increasingly desperate attempts to access frozen accounts. "They're getting sloppy," Mike reported during our meeting at a diner across town. Kyle tried to withdraw funds from what looks like an education trust account, probably your daughter's college fund that he manages. When that failed, he made 3 more attempts at different ATMs. My daughter, Rebecca, Becky, was 30 years old now, a licensed psychologist with her own practice. She'd always been close to both Patricia and me, but lately I'd noticed her asking careful questions about our marriage during our monthly dinners. "Dad," she'd said just last week, "is everything okay between you and Mom?" She seemed stressed about money, which is weird since business has been so good. At the time, I'd brushed it off as normal marital concerns. Now I realized Becky's professional training had picked up on the tension that I had been too, trusting to see. That gave me an idea. If Kyle was desperate enough to try accessing Becky's trust fund, maybe it was time to bring my daughter into the loop. Not to manipulate her like Patricia was trying to do, but to protect her from getting caught in the crossfire of what was coming next. I called Becky that Saturday morning and asked if she wanted to meet for lunch. We'd been doing these father-daughter meals once a month since she'd graduated college, and I didn't want to break the pattern now, especially when I needed her professional insight. "Dad, you sounded kind of serious on the phone," she said as we settled into our usual booth at Romano's. "Is everything okay?" I studied my daughter's face. She had Patricia's green eyes but my stubborn chin, and her psychology training had taught her to read people with uncomfortable accuracy. There was no point in trying to deceive someone who'd spent years learning to spot deception. "Becky, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer as a psychologist, not as my daughter." Her expression shifted into what I'd learned to recognize as her professional mode, attentive but carefully neutral. "Have you noticed anything unusual about your mother's behavior lately?" She was quiet for a long moment, considering. Define unusual. Stress about money, secretive phone calls, asking questions about the business that seem fishing for information. Becky leaned back in the booth. "Dad, are you asking me to psychoanalyze Mom? I'm asking you to tell me if you've noticed changes in her behavior that might indicate she's planning something." The careful way I phrased it must have triggered her professional instincts, because her expression grew more serious. "Mom has been asking odd questions about your company structure," she said slowly. "How partnerships work, who controls what assets, what happens to business ownership in different scenarios. At first, I thought she was just curious about your world, but the questions felt strategic, like she was gathering specific information for a purpose." Becky paused. "Dad, is Mom planning to leave you?" Instead of answering directly, I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording app. "Before you listen to this, I need you to know that what you're about to hear will change how you see your mother. Are you sure you want to know?" She nodded without hesitation. I played the recording of Patricia and Kyle's conversation. Becky's professional composure held for the first few minutes, but when Patricia said 25 years of playing the devoted wife, I saw her wince. By the time Kyle mentioned using Becky's psychology credentials to support false abuse allegations, her hands had clenched into fists. When the recording ended, we sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Becky spoke. "How long have you known?" "A week. I overheard this at Kyle's house last Tuesday." "And you've been pretending everything's normal since then?" "I've been gathering evidence and planning my defense. The military taught me not to react emotionally to enemy action." Becky's laugh held no humor. "Enemy action. That's what this is, isn't it? Mom tried to recruit me as a weapon against you, Dad. She wanted me to provide professional testimony about your supposed controlling behavior. The weight of betrayal, not just mine, but hers, settled between us like a heavy blanket." "What did you tell her?" that I couldn't ethically assess someone without proper evaluation, that her claims seemed inconsistent with your established behavioral patterns. Becky's voice carried an edge of anger now. She was trying to manipulate my professional ethics against you, against everything I've worked for. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'm sorry you got dragged into this. I'm not sorry I know the truth. Her tone hardened with resolve. The question is, what happens now? That's your choice, Becky. I won't ask you to choose sides in this. I already have. She sat up straighter. I choose truth over family loyalty. I choose evidence over emotion. And I choose to support the parent who didn't try to weaponize my career. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by concern for what this would cost her. What about Kyle? How are you going to handle living with someone you know is actively plotting against your father? Becky's expression went cold. My marriage to Kyle was already over the moment I heard that recording. You don't betray family like that and expect to keep your place at the dinner table. We spent the next hour talking through the evidence I'd gathered and the strategy I was planning. Becky's psychology training proved invaluable for understanding Patricia's manipulation tactics and predicting her next moves. Mom's going to escalate, Becky warned as we prepared to leave. When people like her feel cornered, they don't retreat. They attack more viciously. She'll try to paint you as dangerous, controlling, maybe, even threatening. I'm prepared for that. Are you prepared for her to use me against you? Because she will. She'll claim you've turned me against her, that you're manipulating your own daughter. I nodded grimly. Actually, that might work in our favor. If she tries to claim I'm controlling family members, but my daughter, a licensed psychologist, publicly supports me, it undermines her credibility. Good point. Becky stood up and hugged me tight. I love you, Dad. We're going to get through this. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Hope that truth and family loyalty still mattered in the world. Patricia and Kyle had made their biggest mistake yet. They'd underestimated not just me, but the daughter they thought they could manipulate. The war was about to get very interesting. The final confrontation came 3 weeks later, exactly as Becky had predicted. Patricia's desperation had reached a breaking point when she realized the account freezes weren't temporary security measures, but permanent defensive actions. She hired Diana Foster, a divorce attorney with a reputation for scorched earth tactics, and filed for emergency spousal support based on claims of financial abuse and intimidation. I sat at the defendant's table in Judge Patricia Hayes' courtroom on a humid Tuesday morning in August, watching my wife of 25 years perform her greatest role yet. She wore a conservative navy dress with minimal makeup, projecting the vulnerability of a frightened, financially controlled wife. Your Honor, Diana Foster began, with practiced authority, my client has been systematically isolated from marital assets by a controlling husband who uses money as a weapon of intimidation. Mrs. Anderson hasn't been able to access basic necessities for weeks. Judge Hayes, a no-nonsense woman who'd seen every variety of family deception in her 15 years on the bench, listened with professional skepticism. Mrs. Anderson, the judge, said, "Can you describe specific incidents of this alleged financial abuse?" Patricia's voice trembled with what seemed like genuine emotion. Your Honor, my husband has always controlled our money completely. Last month, he cut off my access to every account we shared, even for groceries and gas. When I questioned his decisions, he made threats about what would happen if I tried to leave him. I watched Patricia perjure herself with increasing confidence. Each lie built on the previous one, creating a fictional narrative of systematic control and intimidation by a man who'd spent 25 years providing every luxury she demanded. Judge Hayes turned to my attorney, Victor Mills, a calm, methodical lawyer I'd chosen specifically because he specialized in corporate fraud cases, not emotional family drama. Does the defendant wish to respond to these allegations? Victor stood with the quiet authority earned through 25 years of honest legal practice. Your Honor, we have evidence that misses. Anderson's claims are not only false, but part of a deliberate conspiracy to defraud the defendant of marital and business assets. That's a serious accusation, Counselor. We have audio recordings of Mrs. Anderson and her co-conspirator, Kyle Henderson, planning this exact scenario 6 weeks ago. Patricia's face went white. Diana Foster whispered frantically in her client's ear. But damage control was impossible when your entire case was built on lies. I'd like to present Exhibit A, Victor continued, connecting his phone to the courtroom's audio system. Patricia's recorded voice filled the chamber. When the old fool finally signs those papers, we'll have everything we've been planning for. For the next 20 minutes, Judge Hayes listened to the complete conspiracy unfold. Patricia's mockery of our 25-year marriage, Kyle's legal strategies for maximum asset seizure, their calculated plan to manipulate Becky's psychology credentials, and their cold discussion of timeline and financial targets. The man actually believes I love him, Patricia's voice declared with casual cruelty. I watched my wife's fabricated victim narrative crumble in real time. Her coach testimony about fearing for her safety became absurd when contrasted with her recorded laughter about manipulating the old fool who trusted her completely. Judge Hayes stopped the recording mid-sentence. "Mrs. Anderson, do you have any response to this evidence?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air. Diana Foster's face had gone pale as she realized her client had used her to file fraudulent court documents. "Your Honor," Diana said carefully, "I request permission to withdraw from this case immediately. I was not informed of these circumstances when I agreed to representation." "Motion granted," Judge Hayes said sharply. She fixed Patricia with the stare she reserved for people who had wasted her court's time with perjury. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm dismissing your petition with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of possible criminal charges." The gavel fell with a finality that echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. 6 months later, the dust had completely settled. The divorce settlement reflected Patricia's spectacular miscalculation. Her documented deception eliminated any claim to spousal support, and our prenuptial agreement, which she'd forgotten about in her greed, limited her to minimal asset division. She got exactly what she'd contributed to our 25-year partnership, nearly nothing. Kyle's situation proved even worse. The State Bar Association revoked his law license after discovering he'd embezzled over $85,000 from various client accounts, including the $37,000 he'd funneled to Patricia. Last I heard, he'd moved to Kansas and was working as a night security guard, if he was working at all. Becky filed for divorce the day after our court hearing, citing irreconcilable differences. She's building a new practice now, specializing in family therapy with particular expertise in recognizing manipulation and deception patterns. Turns out there's good money in helping people spot the warning signs I'd missed for 25 years. As for Anderson Construction, the business is stronger than ever. Word got around about what Patricia and Kyle had tried to do, and the community's response surprised me. Instead of viewing me as a man who couldn't manage his own family, people saw me as someone who'd handled a serious betrayal with intelligence and class. New contracts started coming in from business owners who respected how I'd protected my company and employees from the conspiracy. I've hired 3 new project managers, all military veterans who understand the value of loyalty and honest work. My old Army buddy Mike Rodriguez joined as head of security. Turns out his investigation skills translate perfectly to preventing construction fraud and ensuring job site. It's safety. The house feels different now, quieter but genuine. No more performed conversations or calculated affection. No more wondering if the person across the breakfast table is planning my destruction while asking about my day. Just the sound of rain on windows I built with my own hands, in a home that's finally completely mine. Patricia had been right about one thing. I really had believed she loved me for 25 years. Now, I understand the difference between love and a long-term performance designed to secure financial benefits. The military taught me that some battles are worth fighting, and this was definitely one of them. Some nights, I still look at those old family photos and wonder how I missed the signs for so long. But mostly I'm grateful I discovered the truth when I did, before they could complete their plan to destroy everything I'd spent 3 decades building. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't getting even. It's living well and keeping what you've earned, through honest work. That's something neither Patricia nor Kyle will ever understand. And that makes all the difference in the world. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones planning your downfall. But when you catch them at it, you discover just how strong you really are. Trust is earned over years and destroyed in minutes. But a man who's built something real from nothing has the tools to rebuild everything, including himself.